What if I were put in charge of procurement for the U.S. military's next general issue fighting rifle? It's a pretty cool thought experiment. I'm going to answer that today with the knowledge that I have right now, with what I know is on the market right now. What would I choose with my training and experience and knowledge that God's blessed me to have for the next general purpose infantry weapon for the United States of America? Now, I am going to put in the bio because I think the things God's blessed me to do and get through in life play into this. But before that, I often don't mention in the bio a lot about my training background, but I've trained people a lot. Been a professional firearms instructor for military, law enforcement, civilians, FBI certified, NRA certified, taught for another 3-letter government agency. Also, professional firearms instructor at one of the largest private shooting instruction schools in the country. So I think I have a fairly good grasp of the average military, police officer level shooter. I'm not necessarily designing a gun for myself. If I was designing my kind of perfect fighting rifle, this would not be it. This is designed for general purpose, mass issue, frontline infantry weapon. That's what we're talking about today. I'm going to put in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to the podcast. So it is 2023 in this thought experiment, and let's just say for whatever reason the XM5, XM7 has not worked out, the 277 Fury SIG MCX. Let's say that the military decided for whatever reason, logistically, they couldn't get that going with the two different kinds of ammo, the training ammo and the different metal case ammo, whatever reason. It could be no fault of anybody's. Because I don't want to rag on that weapon. I think it's a good weapon. It's not what I would have chosen for the new infantry small arm of the U.S. military. So somebody, put me in charge of this program. And I'm going at it from not designing a completely new weapon, but looking at really good weapons that exist today that we can modify, or maybe not even need to modify. What would I choose for a mass issue? Now, let me tell you, it would not be a direct impingement AR stoner type direct impingement system. I think that's a very good system for law enforcement for CONUS operations, continental United States. I had a catastrophic failure with my AR during the war, and also I saw a fellow contractor have a catastrophic failure of his even years later doing contracting stuff. I am less than impressed with the reliability of that system. I would not go with that system for this. It is a good system for a lot of things. It has a lot of advantages. Low recoil, simplicity, but I think for combat operations in anywhere from, rainforest, steamy, hot jungles to dry, sandy, barren deserts to the Arctic North, I don't think it's the most reliable, and I say that from firsthand experience. You know what is reliable and has proven itself pretty reliable? AK-47s. I don't think anybody would argue with their reliability. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but I don't care so much about pride. I care about keeping American servicemen, Marines, and soldiers alive. And if I think the AK is a better system to do that, I certainly would have no problem using that system. I think a good option for that today would be the Galil. The Galil is a good system. That's where I would start looking, I think, for mass adoption of infantry troops. It's a good system. It's very forgiving of neglect. It's very good in all manner of environments, and I think the Galil does it well. Talking about a few improvements, one thing that I might do, it still has that, let's say, less than robust flip-up dust cover. Now that doesn't really have anything to do with the operation of the weapon. You can take that dust cover off, throw it on the ground, and the weapon will still fire. That being said, if you're going to mount optics, it's easy to mount optics on the Galil, but I would want a more robust system. So I would want a slight engineering tweak. Hopefully I would have a team of engineers for this, and I would have that dust cover more robust and permanently affixed to the receiver, and I would have the back of that have some kind of back plate that slips up or down or clips in place that holds the bolt carrier system in, but the top is fixed, so you can mount a good modern optic without having point of aim, point of impact shift, without that flimsy dust cover. I would pretty much do that with the same backup peep sight. I think that would be a good place to start. I have heard things about the Galils being overgassed. However, if you were making these for you for a contract, I imagine you could get the gas ports drilled to whatever size you wanted for whatever ammo you were going to run. Which brings me to my next point. And this is important. Maybe as important or more important than the weapons platform itself. Now, I think that, and I have thought this for a long time, probably since the first time I shot an M16, coming from a civilian background and already being a state rifle champion when I joined the Marine Corps and being familiar with hunting and hunting guns and shotguns, that it's just kind of a puny round. Does it work? Yes, it works. Does it often take multiple hits to neutralize adversaries? Yes. Can you carry a lot of ammunition because it's a fairly lightweight round? Yes. However, if it takes me several even hits to neutralize a target, am I really gaining the advantages of having all the extra ammo if it takes me several rounds to accomplish a task? If I can carry twice as much ammo but it takes me 3 hits to neutralize a target, you get where I'm going with that. I don't think that round is the best for this. Again, I think it has a lot of merit in other applications, but for a general purpose infantry weapon, I'd want something a little bit more powerful. I don't think I would go the 277 Fury route, me personally, until that technology is proven. I don't think the infantry should be adopting what I would call cutting edge type technology. With all the manufacturing, the 2 different case materials, and in wartime when manufacturing might get more difficult, I don't know And with the two different kinds of ammunition, just logistically, where if you don't know, I think the plan is to use training ammunition that's loaded to more traditional manufacturing and PSI, pounds per square inch, and then there's really hot stuff for warfighting. I don't know how that's going to work out logistically with supply trains and with shooting and point of aim, point of impact shift, because you're certainly going to have to factor that in. So I don't think I would go with the 277 Fury route. I think I would, and I've said this before, I think one of my favorite Wildcats, the 6mm by 45, so the 5.56 necked up to 6mm, the same diameter as 243, and what that's going to give you is quite a large jump up in bullet weight. So your typical, I know you can get heavier stuff than this, but right now the military, and for a long time they've been running 62 grain. You can easily get up to 100, 105, 107 grain, and you pick the twist rate on this because you're doing a contract rifle. But you can get up to 100, 105, 107 grains. That's not a marginal increase. That's what, maybe 40% more in bullet mass. And I think that's a good trade-off. It's still not going to be a super heavy round. You're still going to get the same amount of rounds in a magazine. And I wouldn't stop there. The Ackley improved concept that's been around in a lot of different cartridges, the 280 Ackley. The Ackley concept, the 280 Ackley, is even more popular, I think, now than the regular 280. And it's been around a long time, and there's many Ackley improved cartridges. You don't really have to know what that is, but I would give it a more, let's say, efficient design with more of a straight wall case and a better is arguable, but a steeper shoulder angle, giving me a little bit more powder capacity, and load it a little bit hotter probably, because we have better metals today than we did. I wouldn't probably load it to 80,000 PSI, but even in a regular annealed brass case, you could get quite a bump up in performance, which is already quite a big jump up, in my opinion, in performance over the 5.56 by 45 NATO that we have now. I think it would be very simple. A lot of the machinery, I think, could still be used, and that technology is pretty proven. The Ackley concept is pretty proven. 6mm is known for being good in performance ballistically, as far as both external ballistics, flying through the air, and terminal performance. People may think a 100 grain bullet, let's just say 100 grain, and who knows what. We would probably do a bunch of testing on whether it's better to have a 99 grain or a 103 grain or whatever. But let's just say 100 grain for argument's sake. That 6mm 100 grain is quite a big step up, in my opinion, on ballistic performance over the 62 grain. And you could do similar things if you wanted armor piercing, if you wanted solid copper. And depending on how hard copper was to get, I think solid copper might be a very good and sensible choice for this, because the solid copper bullets, is in like the TSX, TTSXs, things like that, they are known for good terminal performance, especially when you get to smaller calibers. And some may argue that you might want even bigger than that. And I would say, yeah, but there's a trade-off there. And this is in that realm where I think it's worth the squeeze to go up a little bit. I wouldn't want to go all the way back up to 7.62 NATO, or even like the 6.8 diameters or 2.77 diameters. I think this is a good compromise, and I think it's maybe, in my opinion, the best compromise. Urban warfare, longer range, in the light machine guns, that's going to be almost unarguably a better cartridge than what we have now in the 5.56. And I should mention that I think what got my brain started on this, to give credit where credit is due, from a comment, jbone9900. So if you guys do leave comments, I do read them, and this might have gotten my brain sparked on this, because he commented and asked about my thoughts on the M27 and the XM5, and I think I replied back on that, but that got me thinking about this. Like, if I was in charge of this, I think the M27, which is in simple man terms the HK416, kind of pushed into a light squad automatic weapon role, taking the place of the SAW for the Marine Corps. And I think that was a good move. I really do. I was never a fan of the SAW. I think it's one of those guns that's good in concept, but in practicality doesn't work nearly as well. I think this is a better option. I think it would be even better in 6x45, let's call it Ackley. You'd probably want to give it a cool street name like 277 Fury. You call it like the 6.0 Warfighter or something. I don't know, I just came up with that. But let's go back to the small arm itself. What if the U.S. military said, nope, it's a good design, but there's no way we're going to adopt an AK variant, especially when we're going to war with Russia and China in this theoretical scenario. You know, we're anticipating a hot war with China and Russia. That's the reason we're kind of doing this whole looking at a new infantry small arm. So there's no way, even if it is good, there's no way we're going to adopt an AK variant. And I could very well see that. I could very well see that pride and saying we're not going to adopt an AK variant. And I'd say, okay, what else do we have? We already mentioned the AK-416. I think it's a good gun. I think the Marines had a wise choice. If you don't know, that is not the Stoner direct impingement design. It's roughly an AR-ish gun, but I think a main part of that AR Stoner design for that was the direct impingement system. And I know technically it's like a internal gas piston, but most people do refer to it as DI, so that's how I'm going to refer to it. It's a piston system. My only problem with the HK416 is that it's heavy. Looking up the weight for the M27, it is 7.9 pounds empty or 9.8 pounds loaded. And I think that's fine for that role, for a light machine gun kind of base of fire at a fire team level role. But for a general issue infantry weapon, I don't want something that heavy. Now the SCAR 16 would be a really good place to look. It's a proven design. It is not that direct impingement system. And for this, since you're probably not dealing with the legislation of the whole barrel length go that we have, you can't go below a shortened length or it's an SBR. The military is not going to have to deal with that. So I'd probably go even shorter. I'd probably go 14, 12 inches, because you're probably not dealing with the whole gas system thing. That's one thing about the direct impingement system. If you start cutting the barrel real short, you can run into a lot more issues. But I don't think you'd have an issue with this piston system going to, let's say, a 12-inch barrel. Let's just pick one. And that should be a nice, light, handy, reliable weapon. So the SCAR 16, it's already there. It's a good design. We talked about a general purpose mass issue infantry weapon. I think the SCAR 16 would be a good one, especially with that 12-inch barrel, since it already has a folding stock. Very short, handy, compact, very reliable, in my experience, very accurate weapons. We talked about the general issue. You could even go the heavy route, the SCAR Heavy, the SCAR 17, for more specialized roles. You know, the designated marksman type role. And they're going to be familiar with it. It's pretty much the same weapons platform. So that SCAR 16 for a general issue in that 6.0 Warfighter cartridge, I think that'd be a pretty good choice. How would I configure it? Well, it already comes, the SCARs come with the good flip-up iron sights. I would make them 45-degree offset, which wouldn't be hard to do. I don't think if you were making a large portion of them, you could probably even adopt aftermarket already good 45-degree offset flip-up iron sights. For the main optic, I'd have an LPVO, a good proven design, probably have torture tests when you were trying out the rifle to work out any kinks with, you know, whoever wanted to submit. Loophole, Swarovski, whoever, right? A 1:6, a 1:8, something like that for your main optic. The Trijicon Acupoint, they're great. That'd be a good choice. But whoever wanted to submit these, I would try and stay away from anything that takes batteries. We have the tritium fiber optic technology. I would prefer that if I could get it. And a lot of these reticles look like a clown threw up in a tube. There's just colors and slash marks everywhere. I don't want that. I think it's more than is necessary, and I think it can be confusing. I would want a simple reticle, something like a fine crosshair with a fat donut around it for fast shooting, and a fine crosshair for more precise shots. I would want a very simple BDC with a couple of hash marks vertically out to, let's say, 800 meters or more, which is perfectly within the capability of the weapon and the optic and the cartridge. But I would want the main focus of the weapon from 1 to 300 meters, just because I believe in most cases that's where the fighting happens. But you never know what the next war is going to be. So if it's got the capability, putting some simple hash marks in the reticle to shoot out that far is really not going to hurt anything. If I wasn't going with the fine crosshair and the large donut around it, like an illuminated donut around it, I would likely go with the chevron. I like that, the just simple triangular chevron with a couple of hash marks below it. That's also a good design. But LPVO, and I think we have some pretty decent now technology of clip-on thermal sights. So you could have just your regular LPVO, and you could have a clip-on thermal sight that goes in front of it, assuming they pass the reliability rugged test. So you got your daytime, nighttime capability there. That would also hopefully alleviate the need for any PEC2s, any kind of IR lasers for this kind of thing. Just that with a clip-on thermal sight. These already take AR mags, which are a good, proven, reliable design. With that cartridge we talked about, there's no reason it shouldn't work in a standard, Magpul mag. Magpul is a really established Magpul, Amentu, Lancer mags. Whoever did the best in the tests, I would adopt those mags. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts for if I was in charge of the next mass issue, standard issue, infantry, U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps weapon, small arm. The rifleman's rifle for the U.S. military. Those are my thoughts. You may wildly disagree. But again, for this, I would want to go something that's established and proven already if I'm adopting it for our soldiers, Marines, whatever. I wouldn't necessarily want to go with the next experimental thing. So those are my thoughts if I was in charge of the program. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. There should be a place for comments if you listen on Spotify. Scroll down if you want, leave some stars, leave a review, leave a comment. Any of that would be appreciated. And we talk about stuff like this all the time in the Patreon chat. Just one of the cool benefits of being a patron. If you would consider becoming a patron, it'd be a blessing, and I'd be very humbled. Should be a link in the show notes. With that, the tactical tip of the day. Tactical tip of the day. If I were designing this rifle, this kind of ties in. It would probably take a standard AR-15 pistol grip. Most of those are hollow. I would have a little insert with a plug. And in this rifle, for every infantryman, I would include a spare extractor, extractor spring, firing pin, if it fits in there. Also, whatever retaining pins are small that go on the rifle that could be lost. You get the idea. Just have a few spare of those small parts that can get lost, damaged in long campaigns. Have them in that pistol grip. That's what I would have standard issue for this. Now, how does that apply to you? Well, you can do that. I generally put spare parts in my pistol grip. The Magpul ones, a lot of them have a little compartment where you use, let's say, a bullet tip or something, and you can pull the bottom out. It even locks in place. And there's a hollow compartment in there. Why not put stuff in there? In mine, I like to put a simple dope card if I can, where the weapon's zeroed, what ammo. This wouldn't really apply to that, but you can do that if you want. Also, again, the small parts. You want a spare extractor, extractor spring, whatever bolt carrier key, bolt pin, whatever small parts that you might lose, get damaged. You might want to have those in your pistol grip, whether you're running an AR-15 or a SCAR or whatever. If stuff rattles around in there, you can just take a couple of spare pairs of foam hearing protection and fill in there, because you might need hearing protection anyway one day, and it doesn't really weigh much, and it'll stop the stuff in there from rattling around. So that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day, Exodus 15. The Lord is a man of war. That's right. That's a verse in the Bible. The Lord is a man of war. And guess what? He doesn't change. God does not change. From Malachi, I am the Lord, I change not. That is also a verse. Now, if in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, just to illustrate that Jesus is that God. He doesn't change. Jesus said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. There is no contradiction between being a strong, dominant man of war, a warrior, and being a man of God. Example, David. Slayed tens of thousands, slayed beasts, slayed men, a man after God's own heart. Joshua, Gideon, Moses. Warfighters. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.